A successful CMO is the executive that, other than maybe the head of sales or the CEO, is the number one most requested in analyst meetings. Should be anyway, in analyst meetings with key customers. So you have a Fortune 50 customer and you've got a meeting with their COO or their CEO, or, if you as a CMO are not being just by, like, well, of course, Mark's going to be there, well, then maybe you need to work on some of this stuff, because those are the kind of impacts that really this role can have and should have.
Welcome to the B2B Digital Marketer podcast, a podcast helping you to end your struggle with digital marketing, helping you to pave a new and better path to target and capture your ideal customer. Each week, we teach you how insiders and experts debunk the dreary and become engines of innovation. Now, here's your host, Jim Rembach.
Okay, B2B DM gang, man, we're going to have a great conversation today because we're going to talk about the 5 vital traits that high growth CMOs must possess in today's world. And we're going to do that with Mark Donnigan. Mark, welcome.
Hey, thank you, Jim. It's great to be here. This is an awesome conversation. I love it.
Yes,
really excited.
We've had some really good conversations off mic, and we're going to bring these into the conversation so you can get some greater insight.
We're bringing the gang in.
We're bringing the gang
right in. That's
absolutely.
Right.
So, Mark, before we get into it, though, if you could share with the B2B DM gang a little bit about your background and what value you're going to provide to us today.
Well, let's see, my background. So I studied computer science, started programming when I was 12, discovered the Apple II in my school. Now I just dated myself. But my dad, worked for HP. So I was kind of, hey, this is really cool. I'm going to go down this path. Second year of college, I realized that I really wanted to be a rock star. So I went to music school and had a great time. Along the way, though, I figured out that, rock stars, very, 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 very few people are actually rock stars. In other words, they make a living. So I was working my way through college doing sales. Working at an Apple retailer and selling car audio and stereo equipment and things like that, which I was really into. But really, I discovered Zig Ziglar. I discovered that you could write your own paycheck. So my friends, some of them had good jobs. They were making. I remember one of my friends like $14 an hour. Now this was quite a long time ago. So when you're like 19, 20, 21, like $14 an hour back then, like, wow, how did I get a job like that? But then I sat down and went, wait, I can write my own ticket, like I can make 14 or I can make 25, so I didn't always do that. But anyway, discovered sales. And of course, you can tell from the computer science and music thing, I've got a left brain, right brain, thing going on. So I work from both sides. So I can move pretty fluidly between the logical and the creative. And as I just began to grow my sales career and started leading teams and, suddenly was responsible for more than my own production. And, you start saying, wait a second, what other tools do I have here, i.e. marketing? And I just found that, a lot of the environments I was in, I either owned or had access to marketing resources, or I just grabbed them and created them. So that's really how I kind of got started on this whole path of being a marketer. Don't have a business degree, didn't end up getting my MBA or any of kind of the classical things, which some days I wish I did do that. But, through the years have really enjoyed a lot of success and seen a lot of things. And I'm actually super excited about the state of marketing in B2B right now. So I am more energized than ever.
Well, and we're going to get into that. And even some of the things that you said there as bringing in our off mic conversation into it. Yeah. I would dare to say that traditional path, if you would have gone that route, that would probably created some struggles today, wouldn't it?
I think so. And, we might as well just maybe jump in to the 5 traits.
Let's do it, man. All right.
Yeah, I'll tell you, I've had a really interesting epiphany is maybe the wrong word, but we all know, those of us who are in marketing leadership, we hear the statistics of the, the churn in the CMO or the VP marketing chair. And, it's the highest of the C-suite. And, I don't know, I see different numbers all the time. But the fact is that, sadly, CMOs don't often last in their positions. And the epiphany, if you want to use that word for me, was in a few cases, I knew some of the people who came into a role and then churned out, came into a company and then churned out. And before, coming into contact with some of these folks, my perception was, well, it's just not everybody's good at the job. So, hey, they just weren't good, right? That's why CMOs, I guess not all CMOs are as good as I am. No, I didn't think that. But that's when you hear those kind of things, it's kind of like, well, geez, I guess they just didn't get the job done. That's too bad. And you kind of move on. But then I started observing people who I knew were rock stars, who were really, really good. Like they had the skills, they knew marketing, they were leaders, they had proven track records, and then they churn out. And you kind of scratch your head and go, well, what happened? Why did that happen? And I'll tell you, these 5 traits are kind of at the foundation, if you will, of often why someone is high performing and lasts a long time, builds a great career, does something really awesome, and someone who might be every bit as good, but isn't, able to impact the business. So let's jump in.
Okay. So before you do that, and I think it's really important to talk about perspective taking in this. So this could be for somebody who is in a lower marketing role and say, hey, I want that spot.
Absolutely.
In addition to that, it could be for somebody who maybe is searching, for a CMO. What do I need to be looking for?
Yeah.
And then maybe even that existing, CMO or somebody who's at that high senior level that says,
sure,
I don't want to be part of the churn.
That's right. That's right. Yeah, really, really encourage. I'm glad you pointed that out, Jim, is that, this interview and this conversation we're having is not only for existing CMOs who are sitting in the chair, VPs of marketing, heads of marketing, but if you're kind of earlier in your career and you aspire, to grow into a bigger role one day, listen very carefully. And so, let's just start there.
Sounds good.
Yeah. So I'm going to start. I'm going to preface, especially for those who are a little bit earlier in their career. Let me tell you, one more marketing hack is not going to do anything to benefit you personally in terms of growing your career. And so if you find yourself always, there's one more marketing course, there's one more marketing program, there's one more book, there's one more marketing podcast.
Well, there's another new platform. There's
another new tool to learn. There's another new platform. Exactly. I strongly, strongly, strongly urge you to begin to learn about business and the strategy of business, and obviously start with your own organization. So if it's a smaller organization, it's probably possible to even, maybe go to your boss, who might even be the founder or the CEO, if you're a marketing team of 1 or 2 and it's a smaller company. But the point is the first trait of high performing CMOs is they're business strategists. Okay. Now, lest someone think that I'm saying, oh, they don't really have to understand the domain of marketing and all that. No, that's not what I'm saying. In fact, they have to be a master in at least one of kind of the 3 primary functional areas of marketing. They need to be a master of it, and they need to have very strong knowledge of the other 2. But that is not why they're going to succeed. That's not why. They're going to succeed because they are going to understand the strategy. Where is the market going? How is the market evolving? How is the business changing? What are the macro trends and the micro trends, that are impacting us as a business? What's coming down the road? Business is rocking today. In some cases, COVID has been just really difficult. In other cases, COVID has been pretty amazing. It seems very odd to say that in the midst of everything we've all been through in the last couple of years. But let's face it, this is true. But regardless of whether we're sitting in a place where we're saying, wow, we really need to reinvent ourselves, or we're saying, wow, what do we do? This is just so amazing. We have to understand the business, and we have to be able to look at it from a strategic perspective, and then not just from an analytical. I'm not talking about just being able to, write up some paper and be able to explain it, but then be able to bring insights to your boss, to the CEO, to the founder, to, whoever you report to as the CMO. Bring those insights in. They're going to really impact the business. So number one, business strategy is just critical. In fact, the CMO role, in my personal experiences, is that I found that I think about 50% of my time. Now, I work as a virtual CMO. So I come into companies, I work with a couple at a time. And yes, I'm always being engaged to to advise on marketing, help build the team, kind of do your classical marketing activities. But I'll tell you, I have one client that I'll bet you 60 or 70% of our one-on-one time that I spend with the operational executive is strategy. It's talking about the market. It's talking about the business. It's not talking about marketing at all. And yet it is marketing, because that is then going to inform what you do. The second trait is you have to know your ecosystem. Have to know your ecosystem. Now, ecosystem, some of the listeners may be going, ecosystem, if you want to think of it as industry, that's okay. I really prefer ecosystem, because ecosystem is the connected whole of all of the parties and all of the partners that we may interact to, not just our customer, but it can be, nowadays there's so much co-opetition that happens in many, many industries. So understanding, those that are maybe one day we're competing directly with them, but the next day, we're actually sort of arm in arm, building something in the market.
Well, okay, so I'm going to stop you for a second, because
Absolutely.
As you said that, I think, to me, industry is almost yet a component of the ecosystem. Yeah. It's much bigger than that, because of part of what you were saying. In addition to that, I have other factors that could be impacting my ecosystem. That's right. It could be even for example, here in the US, when you start talking about the Fed and impacting interest rates, that could be part of my ecosystem, not just my industry.
That's right. Yeah, 100%. And that's a really good point, Jim. And that's why that is why I intentionally use the word ecosystem. Yeah. I think it's very critical. And then it connects to the strategy, because if we're only looking at this sort of linear activity, like, I work in, I don't know, technology. Okay, I'm in enterprise technology. We're in MarTech, just to kind of pick one. We're in the MarTech sector, and and so I'm only selling to marketing teams, and I have this very kind of focused, myopic, kind of just really narrow view. The problem is that I'm not going to be aware of what's the impact of AI, for example, that is coming from broader IT systems that is going to encroach on my solution. And so all of a sudden,
I start even thinking about privacy regulations.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. There's just so many. So we can keep giving examples, but I think the listeners get the point. So number one, you have to be a business strategist. You just have to. It's not optional. It's not one of those things like, we be a business strategist. You have to do it. Number two, you have to know your ecosystem. Now, I'll give some pointers, because it doesn't mean that if you don't know the industry that you're either going into, or maybe you're interviewing for a job, or maybe you'd like to work for a company and you're like, but I don't know that industry. Doesn't mean that you can't work in there. Doesn't mean that you can't ramp very quickly. What it means, though, is that you better become a student even before you get the job.
Well, as you say that, I start thinking about, if I do that, then therefore I know better questions to ask.
100%.
I know to uncover things that are sometimes just not seen.
Yeah,
There's a whole lot of things that start running through my head as you say that.
That's right. That's right. And so, we get back to our first comment about the churn in the CMO chair. So can you imagine the conversation difference and the dynamic between a CMO and the CEO, where maybe marketing isn't executing it on the business in a way that they hoped, but can you imagine the difference in the conversation when the CMO is just like, well, we just need to spend more on Google ads. I don't know, we spent $1 million. Maybe we just need to ratchet up the budget. I need 6 more people. My team's stretched versus, I've been thinking long and hard about this. And I actually I had a conversation with this CTO in our industry. I talked to this CMO. I think they're a friend here. I talked to this person. Here's what I heard. And by the way, did you see this news release over here? And did you see this company over here just made this announcement? Now, my analysis of that is that I think here's what we're seeing. Now, the good news is that we have an answer to that. The bad news is the product's coming in 3 quarters. Now, let's have a conversation about how we're going to bridge that gap. Wow. Any CEO, doesn't matter industry, it's just going to be like, where have you been all my life? Compared to we just need more brand, it's like the cowbell, bank more brand, more leads. And look, I'm being a little, campy here about it, but unfortunately, those are the, often kind of the responses.
As you start saying that, I start thinking about levers, right?
Yeah, that's right.
If we go into that type of conversation and we're only thinking about levers to pull, I think we're already defeated.
Yeah, that's right. So then the third trait, this leads very nicely into a high performing CMO understands sales. They understand the buyer's journey. They understand the customer. Now, this is where really we start to get practical in terms of the marketing tactics and, how marketing is being executed. Because there is just so much. I see nowadays, I would say by and large, I see great marketing everywhere. And here's what I mean by that comment is the images are awesome. The messaging is on point. It's creative. They're doing creative things. They're engaging. Like it makes me want to stop and click the ad, or it makes me want to, attend the webinar or at least sign up for it, even though most of us don't actually attend. But anyway,
that's part of the problem.
That's part of the problem. Exactly. And maybe we'll touch on that too. But anyway, so the point is that the execution of marketing today in really any organization that is of any size at all is more than sufficient. So where there's a quote failure of marketing, it's not because, well, geez, it's like my 12-year-old could have done better than that. That's not the issue. The issue is it very, very often they don't understand the buyer's journey and they're just not connecting. And I don't mean they don't understand that, the buyer's not on Facebook and they have a Facebook strategy. Yes, that can be a problem, of course. But you see this on LinkedIn where there's just messaging that is just great messaging, but it's just out of sync with how the buyer's actually thinking or who the buyer is. Now, this can be somewhat sort of, you can use the word persona. I'm intentionally avoiding persona because the idea that there's a person named, Jim and Sue who, who act in a certain way and that we're going to create a journey around that is just not the way the world works today. Digital has just absolutely blown that up. Digital meaning, digital transformation, digital marketing. I heard someone described as dark social. And I was like, what's dark social? And he's like, well, that's like when somebody is in a group for CIOs, some forum that they're a member of, and all of a sudden another member just starts talking about a product or company. There's no attribution. There's no way to track it. There's nothing that vendor did. And yet here you've got a conversation going on about maybe your brand or someone else's, your product, someone else's, completely untrackable. It's like dark social. And I went, that's happening everywhere, because that used to be the water cooler, or it used to be the trade show aisle. 10 years ago, 15 years ago, you went to trade shows mostly to rub shoulders with your peers. Hey, what are you guys doing? Hey, we're looking at this solution. What do you think? Hey, and it was that. And then you came back and you told your boss, hey, I think we should look at these guys. I heard so-and-so's using them, right? Now we do that online. So you have to understand sales. You really need to know the buyer's journey. It's very important.
So as you're talking about that, it gets into there's so many impacts to that. For example, just COVID and the need for B2B to try to be able to stand out, to get people at that time where they're ready to purchase, to maybe nurture, that actual decision-making process, to make them move from being unaware to aware. I mean, there's all kinds of different factors that go into it. And then people start deploying tactics. Since we can't do trade shows, do more webinars. Well, that's not what we're talking about here.
No, that's exactly right. So here's a framework that I have found to be really, really helpful. And it comes from a Stanford Business School professor by the name of Clayton Christensen.
Oh, yes.
And so a lot of listeners probably have read, his work and his research, absolutely groundbreaking. Just Google Clayton Christensen. But it's a framework called Jobs to be Done. And I'll keep this very brief, but I think this could be a major aha for somebody, maybe a lot of people. So many years ago, when he developed this whole framework, came out of a research project or an exercise, and they were trying to figure out how to drive milkshake sales at a fast food restaurant. So they had their graduate students out there, and they were doing, their consumer surveys and all the things that you would do, especially in kind of an academic sense. Hey, what would make you buy, if we had this flavor, would you buy, if we introduce this price, is it price driven? Is it, product, or all the normal consumer research, right? And so they're getting all this data, and you hear lots of things. And one day they start observing, or they're putting the data together, and they say, let's look at sales times, like times during the day when milkshake sales go up. And if we could either find a way to spike more times in the day, we're going to sell more milkshakes, or if during that time we can figure out how to sell more, hey, let's figure that out. And they observed that, I don't remember the exact time, but basically like around 7 a.m. to 8 a.m. or 6 a.m. to 8 a.m. was one of these windows where milkshake sales were quite high. And you'd say 6 in the morning, 7 to 8 in the morning, I mean, okay, I guess, but that's kind of odd, right? You would think lunch and dinner and maybe in the afternoon a little bit. What they found was that it was commuters who had a 30-minute to an hour-long drive ahead of them. They would swing through, as they left the house, they'd swing through the drive-through, get a milkshake. Now, you'd say, well, I guess I get that. That's not a very healthy breakfast, but I guess they're kind of eating breakfast on the go. No, that's not what they were doing. It's because they needed something to occupy their time. They had made this drive, in some cases, for hundreds of times, thousands maybe, if somebody's living somewhere a long time, working at the same company, the car could practically drive itself. And the job to be done for the milkshake was to have something in my hand. The straw was just something to sort of play with in the mouth. A milkshake could be consumed very slowly. So it's not like a hamburger where, so many bites and it's gone. So it could occupy 30 minutes, maybe even you could milk it, I guess, as we'd say, literally, for like an hour until they got to the office, got to wherever they were going. Well, this created this whole concept of this jobs to be done, that people don't buy products. They hire a product or a solution for a job to be done. And in this case, the job to be done was not nourishment. The job to be done wasn't, I'm just, I need something cold. No, it was something to occupy their time, consume, as they were doing this mindless drive, for 30 minutes or an hour. So if we think about the buyer's journey in this jobs to be done framework, it absolutely informs our marketing, because now all of a sudden we realize that there is no such thing as this beautiful little funnel where there's the top of the funnel, and then there's the next stage down, and then there's the next stage down. The buyer is jumping all over the place. We are not in control of it. And our job as a marketer is to lay out all of the tools and the resources and the information available, make it as easily accessible so that as that buyer is bouncing around on their journey, they can get the information they need, so they're going to call us rather than call our competitor. Gartner, I'll end my thought with this. In 2018, Gartner published some information that just, anecdotally, I had known this to be true, but when they put out the research, I'm like, wow, okay, 100%, this is what I've seen. The average B2B buyer, and this was 2018, and I would say this trend has only accelerated. The average B2B buyer was more than 50% of the way through their buying process. Remember, their jobs to be done. So all of the different steps that they needed to fulfill on the buyer side, not the vendor side. Buyer doesn't care about us. Okay. They were more than 50% of the way through the buying process before they called a vendor. Think about that. Most all of us have a funnel that's predicated on them starting with the phone call. And then we nurture them, and we have this whole, we all do, right? Some of them it's maybe only 3 steps. I've seen, 12, 13 steps of we're going to walk them through. And then there's this, and then this is going to happen. And then this is going to happen. And then this person's going to get, and it's like, no, that's not what's happening in the real world. So this is so important to understand.
Well, when you said that, I started going back to the ecosystem. So in other words, and here's what I say, when you start thinking about that top of funnel, middle of funnel, bottom of funnel. Well, if I've got massive budgets, right, I could create and do a whole lot of, tactical activities, for that top of funnel. I've got the budget, right?
That's right.
But if that's not me, why would I go up there and compete with those monsters?
Yeah.
I mean, that's just dumb. Right. Also, with what you just said, well, that just validates and actually invigorates my strategy, and then therefore tactics to say, oh, I need to focus on the middle, because those monsters are taking care of the top, and I don't want to swim with them.
Yeah, that's right. 100%. You said it. No need to add more. So now that takes us then to the 4th trait. So just quick recap. So a high performing or a successful CMO has these traits. Number 1, they're a business strategist. Number 2, they know their ecosystem. Number 3, they understand sales and the buyer's journey specifically. So they know their customer. And number 4, they're revenue driven. So this may be obvious, but it is still amazing to me how much tension there is between the head of marketing and the head of sales, or the marketing team and the sales team. And it's sort of like, hey, marketing hit their, look at all the MQLs we threw over the wall. Too bad you guys couldn't close them. That is, if that, of course, no one ever says that, but you can go in so many organizations and it takes like 10 minutes to realize, like, it's not said. No one's ever said they're written those words down, but it is known plainly. There's this war, right? And that is wrong. Everyone today is in sales.
Well, okay.
Everyone.
So when you said that you started seeing actually in the past 3 years, you've seen this significant growth in the role of CRO.
Yeah.
So it's almost like the CRO has been brought in order to, I don't want to say bridge or referee, but it's like saying, okay, we're not going to deal with this. CRO is going to clarify things for us.
Yeah. So, and this takes us into our 5th trait, and that is executive relationships. But let's go back to revenue driven. So again, a CMO, now obviously the levers and the tools available to the CMO, I've heard it described as sort of like the Air Force versus the Army or the ground force, whereas marketing is sort of like the Air Force. So on one hand, you can cover a lot of air, a lot of ground, but it's very different what someone in an airplane can do versus, a lot of troops on the ground, right? So the sales team, they're troops on the ground. I mean, they are, they're out there engaging with customers day in and day out. They're fighting the good fight. And, look, this is why I believe very, very strongly that marketers should, find a way to shadow your sales team, find a way to really get empathy to what your sellers are going through. Because I will tell you, not only will it radically inform and change potentially what you're doing in marketing, because you'd be like, wow, we're over here creating all this stuff that we just think is great. No wonder the sales team doesn't use it or complains, we're going to stop doing that. But if you're not out there, if you don't spend some time in the field, all you get is salespeople coming back going, yeah, I don't use that. And then, of course, you think, oh, it's just salespeople being persnickety, or whatever. It's like, no, it's, they want to succeed too. I mean, so being revenue driven is so critical because, again, if marketing is missing its metrics, but the lens that everything's being measured through is revenue, and everybody is pulling together and everybody is pushing towards how can we be better performing. I basically have abolished in the organizations that I work with the whole concept of an MQL. Okay? Because at the end of the day, do you want MQLs or do you want revenue? I can give you MQLs. Anybody who's even a couple of years of experience knows how to go off and buy some advertising, drive some leads to a form, get some signups, then go, see, look, isn't that amazing? 1,000 leads this month. We only had 600 last month. Wow, yay for us. Meanwhile, none of those convert. They were all junk. Half the people, they didn't even know what they were signing up for because we just did a good job with a copy, or we tricked them with a free Amazon gift card, giveaway. Like, not even close to our ICP, but we got our MQLs in. So high performing CMOs understand this. And look, again, just to make sure, what I'm saying is not taken out of context. I am not saying that there isn't a concept of, of a lead, and there isn't a concept of some sort of qualification, marketing and sales qualifications. That's not what I'm saying. Of course there has to be. But the concept that the primary job of marketing is to drive MQLs or SQLs or some other definition, I just don't believe that that's really what's going to move business, forward in today's world, in today's market. So then number five trait is you have to have great executive relationships. This is, and this is universal, of course. It's not just for the CMO, but we're talking about marketers. So you have to have great executive relationships because if that marketer is only reporting, if it's kind of a one-way conversation of the CEO down to the CMO, kind of in this boss, employee type relationship where it's kind of like you're reporting, okay, here's how we did, here's the status of this campaign, here's what's happening here, and it's kind of just one-way reporting. It's just, there's going to be no strength there. There's not going to be any real ability to be a partner in growing the business. And this is why everything combines, because it's hard to have a good executive relationship if you're not bringing much to the other executives around you. And so this is why being a strategist, understanding the ecosystem, are critical tools. Because let me tell you, you sit down with the CRO, the head of sales, as the CMO, and you say, hey, I want to share with you something I just heard. I was talking to so-and-so and, at this, and boy, I found this really interesting. I wonder if we should be thinking about that. And the CRO is like, light bulb moment, like, wow, that connects. Wow, that's amazing. Oh, thank you. That's now there's a value exchange there, right? And this doesn't then just kind of devolve into a finger pointing of, hey, we sent you all the leads. How come your guys can't close them? Well, they're junk. Well, that's, it's just finger pointing back and forth, right? So you have to have great executive relationships, starting with your boss, the CEO, as the CMO, but I would say equally with your peer in sales, whether that's a VP of sales title, CRO, whatever the title is, but whoever's heading up sales, very, very important.
So as you're talking, I start thinking about, CMO and the evolution and the growth path. And where do you see the role of CMO going?
This is a great question. So when you talk to someone on the marketing side, I don't think any of us, I'm not hearing too many people say, hey, the CMO should really be sort of taking over the revenue responsibility and kind of morphing into, sales and, marketing and sales. It's more that the CMO role is definitely expanding into the strategy and the corporate development side. Now, again, somebody might say corporate development, like, the investment arm of the company and all that. No, that's not it. But corporate development from the perspective that a successful CMO is the executive that, other than maybe the head of sales or the CEO, is the number one most requested in analyst meetings. Should be anyway, in analyst meetings with key customers. So you have a Fortune 50 customer and you've got a meeting with their COO or their CEO, or, if you as a CMO are not being just by, well, of course, Mark's going to be there, well, then maybe you need to work on some of this stuff, because those are the kind of impacts that really this role can have and should have. And you want job security if you're functioning at that level, because let's face it, not every day everything's going to go right. And so marketing, can be hitting a whole bunch of home runs, and all of a sudden it's like you're having a hard time getting on base. But if you're having the kind of impact that we're talking about, you're not going to have to come home each night worried that on Friday you're going to get a phone call, the dreaded, we've decided to make a change, kind of a thing. And so the role, I really believe, is absolutely heading into this everything we're talking about, really. Now, the role of the CRO, I believe, as both a salesperson and a marketer, someone who's led sales teams and someone who's led marketing teams, is that the CRO role is critical. You need someone who is a sales killer, if you to think of it that way. At their core, who knows how to motivate salespeople, who knows how to lead salespeople, who knows how to build the structures that a sales motion can be built on, the foundation. And in my experience, as much as a lot of marketers have sales experience, can gain sales experience, can learn a lot of this, it's different than having, walked in those shoes for many, many, many years. Yeah. So I guess just to, summarize, I really believe that the CMO role is of course, always will be heavily oriented around marketing development. But if it's not connected to strategy, corporate strategy and revenue, driving revenue with the marketing tools, in the toolbox, I think it's just going to be difficult to stay relevant. It's not to say that someone can't still sustain a career and hold a job, but I really believe that you have to bring the strategy to the position to really be successful today.
Well, as you're talking, to me, I start getting this visual picture that the CMO needs to be the person who's the expert of bringing the outside realities into the organization.
Yeah. I've had personal experience all through my career. And as usual, a lot of times these things evolve and they just sort of happen. And then you look back and you can kind of realize like, oh, wow, that's why that dynamic works so well. But I can think of one fairly recent situation where when I would talk to my counterpart who was leading sales, we just didn't talk. Our conversations had nothing to do about him, sort of quizzing me on, what are our marketing tactics. And in fact, sometimes I'd even try and tell him, hey, this works. And he'd be like, yeah. Mark, you guys doing a great job, but what are you hearing about this? It was always his favorite thing was, what are you hearing about? I mean, and then there'd be this, what are you hearing about? And then he would say some, maybe major news in the industry that just happened in the last day or two. Or what are you hearing about? And he'd name a company. What are you hearing about? He'd name a person. And invariably, because I made it my job to be very well connected, I was able to bring a little piece. I would then ask him the same question, and then we'd compare notes. And what was the impact? The impact was it helped him with his sales strategy. In some cases, these were customers we're trying to win, or even existing customers of the business, of the company. So it helped him. It helped me because now I got other data points. Now I understood more, so that we could adjust maybe some of the things we were doing. So those were the conversations we had. And I've just found that in a lot of organizations, that's not the conversation that's happening between a marketing leader and a sales leader. It's just more tactical and more like, what can we do to just improve lead quality? Well, okay, that might be important to talk about, but boy, that's basic and early maturity. That's block. Yeah, that's block and tackling. Like that should be. Yeah. So.
Mark, oh man, it's been an immense conversation. Thanks for sharing these 5 vital traits that high growth CMOs need to possess. And Mark, how do the B2B DM gang get in touch with you?
Yeah, absolutely. So I have a website. If you go to growthstage.marketing, so growthstage.marketing, I've got a couple presentations up there. I have one on category design, which we didn't talk about, but that's a topic that I'm very passionate about. And I have another one that's really great. If you're a founder or you're thinking of founding a company and you're sort of like, how do I even build my first marketing team and function? You'll see them. There's no gate. I don't like forms. So yeah, you just click on it and the PDF will open and hopefully you'll find it, helpful.
Mark Donnigan, thank you for sharing your knowledge and wisdom, and we wish you the very best.
All right. Thank you, Jim.
Thank you for joining us. Go now to join the B2B DM gang in the B2B Marketer LinkedIn group, where you can connect with other B2B DM disruptors and get access to our B2B DM cheat sheets, checklist, and guides. While you're at it, if you found value in this show, please help by going to iTunes to rate, review, and subscribe. And share the show on all of your digital platforms. Be sure to tune in next week for our next episode. And always remember, you can automate your lead capture, but you must lure your lead.